welcome to my living room. Come on in, join me for a drink. I personally am having a glass of wine, but I hope that you can pour yourself your drink of choice. Glass of red wine, glass of champagne, a cup of tea, a cup of coffee. I'm just so happy that you can be here with me this evening for this fabulous conversation that I've been looking forward to for quite a while with a special guest that I cannot wait to introduce you to. We have many different topics to discuss this evening, and we have all of the fabulous questions that you sent in. So I know this is going to be a very interesting conversation, and I'm so grateful that you can join us. So cheers. Hi everyone, welcome to Tell a Sister. I am so happy that you all are able to join us, and I can't wait to introduce you to Mieke. So what is Tell a Sister? Tell a Sister is a creative roundtable focused on inspiration, entrepreneurship, and all things decorative arts. This evening, I will be speaking with Mieke on the ever-evolving role of the stylist today. Mieke Tenhoff is an interior stylist. She's a design writer and she's a creative consultant. Mieke comes from the editorial world, having worked at magazines like Vogue and Elle Decor, where she was the home editor and design editor at large, respectively. She is now a contributor to Architectural Digest and House and Garden UK. Mieke produces and styles shoots for a variety of clientele, ranging from interior designers and architects to design and lifestyle brands. As a writer, she has worked on several books and continues to write for a number of publications, in addition to content for brands and designers. So this evening, I thought it would be very fun to kind of kick off the conversation with some behind the scenes, so you can see Miike's work and have a kind of a little preview of her process. So here we go with a video of Mieke at my house a couple of weeks ago, styling a table in my family room.
But you couldn't find us. Ooh. You must have been fooled by our parent practice. Ooh. A million years from now is now to you. The fabric of the sky lifts and fills like a parachute.
Okay, so I know that was so much fun.
It's nice to see that process, you know, it's because when you're in it, and you never really get to see how it kind of unfurls, you know.
I know, and I think that it's so important to show the behind the scenes. And that's why I really want to start off with this video, because I think it really shows how multifaceted your job is. You are a storyteller, you're an interior designer, you're a floral designer, you have a love and passion for the decorative arts. Just the room you're sitting in right now, I haven't been there in person, but I've seen photographs and it's absolutely amazing. Your barn in, I guess, the northwest corner of Connecticut, or in New York.
New York, yeah.
New York. So I wanted to kick off the conversation with what past experiences best prepped you for your job today?
Well, that's a good question, because I never really set out to be a stylist. That was not something that was really even on my radar. I come from the editorial world, and I worked in magazines for many years. And, you know, as a magazine editor, you always have to think editorially. What is the sort of essence of the thing that you're trying to convey? And whether it's through words or it's through images, it's about, you know, cutting down to or distilling to what the most clear picture of what it is that you're trying to say or do or express. And that cuts across images, and it cuts across written words, it cuts across all of those things. So I think, being an editor has really made me kind of fine tune my eye and my point of view and think about narrative. At the end of the day, like a lot of what I do is building a narrative. Stylist is like a funny term because it's like, I don't think of myself as a stylist. I don't know really what I think of myself as, because I do several different things. But I guess that's the apropos term these days.
Right. No, that actually leads me to my next question, which I know this is a live Zoom, so I apologize to everybody. But Mieke, do you see your the slides?
No.
Okay. Here they are.
Yes, now I do.
Okay, now I do. Thank you, tech. All right, so that that was my first slide, which we just addressed, which was a clip from my house. And Mieke has worked at my house. Well, I'm decorating my house slowly. And so this is just a portion of my family room that I hope to keep adding to and keep decorating more. So stay tuned for that. But the next slide I wanted to show you was of my office that Mieke shot last, I think it was this past fall with Reed McHenry. And I think that something I just wanted to kind of talk to you about, and this is more kind of behind the scenes, is that, my office had two giant mirrors on either side, and Mieke promptly took them down and hung the artwork on the wall to the left. And I just thought it'd be interesting for people to kind of I thought it'd be interesting for you to walk us through your process when you get to set, when you get to someone's house. What do you do when you walk in the door, and what is going through your mind?
The thing that I always do, getting back to like a narration, is I set up all my shots. So when I do a walkthrough, initially, I immediately take stock of the important rooms, and not only the important rooms, but the important angles. And because, you're telling the story through only so many frames. You don't need the whole house.
Right.
You don't need to see everything.
Right.
And so like this picture is an excellent example of that, because we just had this little nook. This is at the end of a hallway, and it's this it's a wonderful big hallway, but it looks out into this beautiful view, and it has this great window. And I immediately felt like, okay, we don't need to see more than what we're seeing right here. There's this sort of element of romance looking out the window and putting it right in front of it with these beautiful curtains and this beautifully upholstered chair. And then it was just, pulling in all these elements to tell a story. Like the mirrors were pretty, but they weren't really doing anything. And they certainly don't do much when you're putting a camera in front of it, because then you just see your own reflection.
Right.
And the wonderful thing about working with Sister Parish has been that you have all of these wonderful little archival things and collages and all this decoupage that your grandmother Apple has done, and all these sort of meaningful bits of the decorative arts and American design history, which is why it's such a pleasure to work with you guys. But so it was really fun to bring in all these elements and to just, create this frame and think, okay, how do we activate every inch of this frame and really maximize it? So, I brought in the rug at the bottom there, and all of the samples that you've been working on, which is like such an important part of what you do. And then these kind of amazing images of Sister and Albert Hadley that you see there on the left.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant kind of in the beginning when I prompted everyone, what does a stylist mean to you? Because you really do make the room come alive. Essentially you're making the kind of when you're photographing just a still picture, when you're photographing a room and there's obviously no one there, you want to show the residences and who is actually in the room at that time. Yeah. So
and a lot of times, a decorator will have done an incredibly beautiful job on, finishing a project, finishing a house. And a lot of times when you walk in, it doesn't feel like anybody actually lives there.
Right. Exactly.
And exactly. Nobody does live there. And so it's teasing personality out of the room. That's
Exactly.
always a challenge, or often is.
Exactly. Yes, teasing personality. So I wanted to go on to the next slide, and actually this brings me into, this is kind of just a little bit more of what we're discussing now, but when you're working with a client, a brand, a designer, like what's your process for showing who the client is? Like, how do you capture their personality? And I think what I've noticed with me at Sister Parish Design, you just kind of, you go, my great grandmother did this. She'd talk about when she'd first go to, you know, a potential client's house, and she'd just like, kind of just like start rummaging through their things. Like she'd literally open their closet and start pulling out, you know, that's what you do.
That is what I do. And it's a very intimate thing. Like, I mean, I've been into way too many like bedside drawers, like, you know, I mean, that is part of the job. Like you just,
Yeah.
you know, for the most part, it's my client, it's usually not their house. You know, but it depends. If it's a brand, you know, if it's a brand like your brand, there's so much history out there to read about. You know, I have like Sister Parish books that, you know, for a brand like that, in a way, it's a bit easier because there's so much written about you.
Yeah, you already know part of the story. Well, you already know the story.
Yeah. And you know, and also like, I think my point of view is quite simpatico with your point of view. But you know, it's really just about talking to the client and looking at the images. I mean, it's images, images, images. That's really what the important thing is. It's looking. I mean, I feel like that's such a huge part of my job, is always looking. I'm always looking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think also what's fun is that when you're on set and when I'm working with you, and when I'm working with you and a photographer, it really is a very collaborative process. But I think the more experience you have on set, the more you know when to collaborate and when to step back.
That's
and
right.
something like in my apartment, yeah, like when I started decoupaging my fireplace, I realized, you know, Mieke would do a better job at decoupaging my fireplace than I was actually in my mind. So I kind of partially decoupaged it, and then I was just kind of waiting for you to see what you would do. And then you added this beautiful vine, and you again you added life to the room. You made that fireplace really pop in that image. You added soul. And I think that's probably, you probably worked on other projects in the past, I'm sure. This is a question I was going to ask you kind of at the end, but there's probably some projects that you find really memorable, I'd assume, where you find that the collaboration between the designer or the brand, whoever you're working with, and the photographer and the whole team behind the scenes is really just exceptional. Do you have a memory of, or an example of that?
I think like so much of that is kind of predicated on like, if I'm responding to something visually, like if it's my, you know, I do so much work that isn't my point of view, which is really interesting and gratifying in other ways. But when I get into doing something that I visually relate to, that is like the most I mean, that's the thing that makes, you know, I mean, my pleasure is visual. You know, I derive so much pleasure from beautiful images of interiors, and I have my whole life. And I suppose that's why I do what I do. But to me, that's the most gratifying part of the job, is putting together, composing a picture and putting all the elements together and working with the photographer and seeing the client happy and feeling just ecstatic at the image that comes out of that collaboration.
Exactly. And then when you see someone, I mean, I've never had this experience, but I imagine it. When I open up a magazine, I mean, I've only been published one time in House Beautiful, one of the best days of my life. But when I open that magazine, I like to visualize someone opening that magazine in that room, making them so happy and like so inspired, and that they actually feel us in that image.
Exactly. And it's an image that maybe you hold on to for years, you know, and you revert back to. I mean, you know, I have such a huge collection of old world of interiors and all the old ADs, and you know, I go back to them, and you know, good design lasts forever, and that's a truism.
It really is. I mean, there's nothing better to have that time to go through old magazines.
That's right.
I love nothing more.
I know. I'll like bring a stack to bed with me, and then just, you know.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. COVID has allowed for a little bit more of that.
Oh my God, I know. It's like I miss museums so much, and thank God for books. That's all I'll say.
What's your favorite museum in New York, if you can even answer that question?
The Met. It's always the Met. It's just there's I mean I love seeing the Neue Gallery. I love going to the Frick. I mean I love so many museums, but the Met is one of those places that you can see everything in the world in a short period of time, and it also is so big that you can just kind of wander without an agenda, and that is really fulfilling, I find.
I know, and also really peaceful.
It is. Oh, God, I miss it.
I know, me too. Okay, well, let's go to the next slide. First, I just want you to tell us about where these tablescapes were shot. Just tell us a little bit about both of these projects.
So the left table is Wes Gordon and Paul Arnhold's place in Manhattan. And Stephen Sills was the designer, and Stephen Kent Johnson shot it, and we shot it for for Architectural Digest. And I just love setting a table. I think because I see it as just like this perfect little canvas, and there's so many different kind of elements that you can put on it, and it's a place for color and pattern and the decorative arts and history of objects, and it all kind of and flowers, of course, and it all kind of synthesizes on the table. And I don't always set a table when I'm styling, but if the person that I'm styling for, or if the location has, if the person has a good collection, then it's a joy to like pull it all out and bring it together. And so in this case, those were plates that Carolina Herrera, that Wes, I think had, designed with Carolina Herrera to put in production.
Okay.
Paul is a glass blower, and those are his glasses. And the napkins, I think they picked up on a trip in Mexico. And then we took this fabric and I sort of laid it on the table horizontally. And, not to mention it's like a pink cement table. It's kind of fabulous.
Just about to ask, what is that table? I was just about to ask, what is that table made out of? It looks so
cool.
Yeah.
And then the right was for El Decor, and it was an Alberto Pinto project in Ibiza, and I shot that I don't know, maybe 6 years ago. And of course, Alberto Pinto was known for the most incredible tablescapes and tableware and table collections that he built for himself, and also, of course, for his clientele. So that was a natural thing that, I mean, he had passed away by the time that I had shot this, but nevertheless, all of the china cupboards in this amazing seaside villa were just stacked with incredible flatware, china, glasses, linens, you name it, they had it. And then, I just went out and snipped some bougainvillea and put it all together. And it was, it's just very gratifying to do that kind of a thing.
So that must have been hard to edit. Was that hard to pick what you wanted to use?
I know I'm pretty quick. I don't know.
You are, yeah. I guess that comes from experience.
I think maybe I picked for the first thing, and then it all kind of, followed suit from there. I think I probably picked like whatever my favorite plate was, and then I built off of that.
Yeah.
Well, I was glassware, as you can see.
Oh, lovely. No, cheers.
Yes.
Well, I was thinking about how textile design for me has made me a better interior designer and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine when you're on set and you're able to, you're styling these beautifully decorated houses, I bet that obviously kind of affects maybe how you're decorating your houses in hopes of maybe entertaining in a certain way, or adding those extra kind of flourishes at the end. Like maybe you see an opportunity for something on a table.
It just brings it to life a bit more, especially as a collection, to be able to like show it in a way that's not just opening up the cupboard or something and shooting it, but actually to make it seem like it's happening, that you could sit down at this table, or you could, be involved with it in a more visceral way.
Yeah. And don't you enjoy having dinner parties and having people over and entertaining?
Obviously, I love all that. I'm so very frustrated these days. I mean,
can't. You love it because it's an excuse to use your collections of china.
I know. I have a problem with that, but anyway.
Yeah. So Mieke has cupboards. How long have you collected China for?
A long time.
Okay. And when did this obsession start, and what inspired you to begin this?
I mean, it was probably like, vis-a-vis my mother had really pretty plates and my grandma, I mean, it was just kind of a family thing. And then, I mean, my grandmother definitely had a plate problem. I mean, she would like, they'd be coming out of everywhere, plates.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and I guess I have inherited that mental malady.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean,
Well,
they're so pretty and decorative and like, and you can use them. I think that's part of the thing about the decorative arts that I find so wonderful and interesting. Um, is that these are objects that people use, that you live with them. They're beautiful and you live with them. And I think it's like that kind of touch of humanity makes the decorative arts so interesting to me.
yes. And I don't know what that room is in Sweden. You know, that room, that dining room that's covered, has those beautiful, it's basically bookcases filled with plates. Have you seen that room?
I probably have, but I'm not sure which one.
Anyway, I think that's something that you should replicate for yourself, because I totally agree. I think plates and china, obviously, I mean, for me, they inspire my textile design.
Yeah, I bet they do. Because you have to think about the repeat and the scale and all of these, and color, obviously.
Yes, and yeah.
That kind of binds them.
Right. And I think you have the confidence, and I forget where, I think you wrote this about yourself in Architectural Digest, but about how you enjoy having color and pattern kind of battle one another in a room.
Yeah. That's like definitely a big part of my point of view. And
yeah.
I mean, I like tension in a space, and I like tension in a picture. I like tension in a room. The eye can get bored, and I think if you don't have that kind of friction, you don't want to veer into predictable territory. That's my feeling.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think can we move to the slide with the next slide, actually, with the umbrella, the photograph by Scott Francis. Whose apartment? Yes, this apartment.
This one, yeah. So this was a big honor. This was Mario Buota's last project. That he had already passed away, and AD asked me to style it, which obviously was, was a wonderful opportunity for me.
Yes.
And it just was like, the writer Emily Evans Erdman, she said it was a plum of a project, and she was right. I mean, he was like, quite old and not doing well at that point, I think, physically. There was no like bouillon fringe left unattended to. I mean, it was really just beautifully done in his later years. So this was a real pleasure, because the client, his client, the homeowner, had a very large collection of Magritte paintings. And so, I mean, I took the cues from the art here, of course, the art and the fabric.
Yeah. Well, what I thought was interesting, what I noticed in this room, is that it's obviously this beautiful room. The flowers, the window boxes are matching the beautiful pink silk curtains, and the photo looks, totally perfect and symmetrical. But then you notice that it's also perfectly imperfect, and that the chairs are askew, and you can kind of see the arm of the upholstered chair.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that a little bit? Kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I think like a picture has to breathe, and it has to have like a flow to it and a cadence. If everything is like tight and perfect, like getting back to what I said before, your eye gets kind of bored.
Mm-hmm.
So like people love symmetry, and I one time wrote an article. I was interviewing Thomas Jane, and he said something to the effect of like, symmetry is only interesting if you break it. And I come back to that idea a lot in what I do, because I think you need an element of surprise, or an element of the unexpected, and you have to kind of take the perfection out of something that's really beautiful, I think, for it to be interesting.
What did he say? Symmetry is only interesting if you break it. That's so good. And I think, well, let's talk about your flowers for a second, because my colleague Madison, she said that your flowers are a perfectly imperfect art form.
That's
And I would love, like, just looking at, I mean, and also I think about my great grandmother who always wanted flowers to look like they were picked straight out of the garden.
yeah. Well, that's my
Um,
approach too a bit.
yeah. So, can you just kind of walk us through? I mean, you are masterful with artists. I mean, with flowers. I'm sure that a lot of our audience has Googled you. I know I have when it comes to flower arranging. Just like, can you just tell us a little bit more about how your love for flowers began, and just
Yeah, I mean, so it's not like I grew up being like really that interested in flowers, but I think I just kind of absorbed it. I spent my summers in Maine, and my mom had a garden and was always working in the garden and bringing flowers
yeah,
in. And she had, beautiful pots, and she would put the flowers in the pots, and she just did them in this really pretty ways. And, it was not something that I ever like really studied or paid that much attention to. And then, just for working, when I had to do a lot of it when I was at Vogue, I would throw flowers together for last minute picture or whatever. And then when I started producing photo shoots, of course, um, I had to start working with flowers and getting comfortable with flowers. So there's like no kind of like studied approach. It became kind of like an intuitive thing that I learned how to do over the years. But like your great grandmother, like I love something that feels loose and lush and living. And the other interesting thing about flowers is that they go through trends just like anything else. And in the 90s and early aughts, I think it was really about these like constricted tight arrangements, often like one note, one color, one kind of flower. And I just like don't think that's so. I always feel like they look tortured, like these tortured flowers that are shoved into some like tight vessel.
yeah,
So I like flowers where you see like the expression of each kind of flower. And they work beautifully together, almost in opposition to each other and complementing each other. So I always strive for asymmetry, and I always strive for kind of a more wild look.
yeah. And you're constantly traveling to all these different cities. Are you always in search of the flower market or the?
I am, but I mean, my favorite thing to do is to like get a pair of garden shears or a pair of scissors if the weather is right, if the location is right, and just to like go out into the backyard, or find a nice tree somewhere. Um, because it also feels more authentic to the place that you're at. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
like, I don't like flowers that are, the wrong location or the wrong season for wherever it is I'm shooting. I mean, if you're in a New York City apartment, that's one thing, because
right,
you're in New York, it's the epicenter of the world, like everything arrives
right,
there. There are no
right.
gardens to be had. So, I mean, that's makes more sense. But, to put tropical flowers in a cold environment, or English peonies in the Bahamas, that doesn't really make much sense. So I
Right.
try and like keep things very kind of appropriate to wherever the location is.
Yeah, no, that makes that makes total sense. Well, maybe we should go back to the just the slide beforehand, of the beautiful porch. Where is this?
This is in Foligandros in Greece, and I shot this I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, or maybe it was less than that. But this was for Elle Decor. I used to be an editor there. Um, and This was this windswept island, like, and there was nothing on this porch, but it was so beautiful, and it reminded me of like Homer and the Iliad, and all,
Yeah.
yeah, stories that you learn about growing up about, anyway. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, this. Yeah. Sorry. Go on.
I just wanted to activate this space, and so I brought in the chairs and the table and all and the pots in the background, um, and the dog. And I did this kind of like, I wanted it to have this element of surrealism to it. The scene in the foreground with the black cups and the oranges and the dog. And I wanted to activate the space, and um, yeah, this was a great shoot. These are two designers. They go by Carmole Queda, and they're Italian, but they spend a lot of time um, at their home in Greece.
Yeah, especially love how that pot all the way in the back to
Yeah,
just
I mean,
love
again, it's
that.
just about like activating space, that's a lot of what I do is to activate spaces.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of prompted me to ask you if there are any kind of war stories you want to tell in the styling world. Meaning, like, is there ever
I
been a
mean,
time?
war stories, they're only like war stories if like your flowers don't arrive or like, you know, I mean, I remember I was like early, my daughter's 3 now, but it was like early in my pregnancy and I got snowed in and stuck in Truckee and I had to sleep in some horrible motel. And, I mean, that's like a war story, but that's just more like a really
I don't know.
story, it's not really a war story. But no, every house is its own challenge. And some
Right.
houses think they're gonna shoot easily and then they're not. And then some houses you think are gonna be hard and they're easy. Every house is its own story.
Yeah.
And you don't know it till you're in it. You have to be in it.
Well, you clearly love to travel and are comfortable traveling and visiting new places. Is that a comfort zone for you? Kind of
Yeah,
on
I
the go.
feel, I feel comfortable traveling. You have to, I think, in this job. It also, I mean, the wonderful thing about traveling is that it just continues to feed your eye. And I think that's a
Hmm.
really important part of being a stylist is to tune your eye and to always be looking.
Exactly. And that makes it so, I mean, travel is so essential for any type of creative.
That's right.
And I'm sure when you come home, then you're just so inspired to do more at home, because you're visiting all
I
these
mean,
incredible interior
I
designers.
think that I'm like a pretty good editor, but I'm not a good editor in my own house.
Yeah.
I'm just like a hoarder. I'm like, oh, if I like it, I'll make room for it. Bring it in. What's another object? Just whatever.
Well, my grandmother loves, I mean, and she collects, and anything really. And she really believes, like, she gets very attached to all of these things that
Me
she.
too. I'm like Marie Kondo would never work on me because I'd be like, yes, that brings me joy. That brings me
No,
joy.
put it down. Well, I want to go now to the photograph by Simon Upton. And that's the other thing, Mieke. You've worked with so many incredible
Oh my
photographers.
gosh, I've been so lucky to work with the best photographers. I mean, it's such a joy to see what they do.
I know. And it must be, was it ever, I mean, so when I think for people who aren't kind of in the industry, when you're an editor, when you were the homes editor at Vogue, you would also, while you're producing stories, you're also on set and maybe talk more about what that's like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, my role has changed because I used to be staff at a magazine and it was a big part of my job was like bringing in stories and,
Right.
working with the editor in chief to determine which stories would run. Um, I did that a lot at Elle Decor and I brought in stories at Vogue, et cetera. Um, and then I would, go and produce the shoot, but it was less about being a stylist, I think, per se back then, and more about making sure the story was like told properly
Okay.
vis-a-vis the magazine's brand, for example.
Yeah.
And
But
then, but you did have to be, that is how I got involved in styling was that I was producing these interior shoots for magazines. Um, you
right.
know, now it's a much more like hands-on thing, I think.
Okay. No, I just think that sometimes I didn't realize before I was in the industry that when you're an editor, you're working in I think it changes, I guess, from time to time, but that you're really involved in the whole story, even when it comes down to that day, that shoot day. Like, it's very
That's
important that
right.
you're there.
Yeah, you're
And
sort of
um,
shepherding the story through.
right, right. So that's completely cohesive. So I just thought that was interesting. But so tell us about this room.
So this is Dakota Johnson's house in Hollywood. Um, and it's a mid-century house, obviously designed by an architect whose name I'm blanking on, but he was a friend of Lautner and Neutra and all of those, big mid-century designers. And it was really just such a perfectly lovely mid-century. I mean, mid-century style is like not my style, but I really can appreciate it. And I really appreciated this house. It was just really beautifully done. Pierce and Ward did the interiors, and they've done a lot of beautiful work. They work with actually quite a few celebrities.
Right.
But they did a really deft job, I think, with this house, which I think can be, the historic houses like these of this time period, I think can be challenging because there is a certain kind of austerity to them, and like they were built a certain way and they were meant to be kind of decorated a certain way. And anyway, they did a really beautiful job with this house. And so I felt my role here was really just to make the house sing, because it didn't really need very much. I wanted to be very kind of simple in the way that I handled the styling, and just add maybe a little element of sunshine to it, because we are in California, and the flower market in California in LA is just my favorite probably in the world.
Oh my gosh.
So this was a great shoot, but it was like it was a project where you had to be careful not to like gild the lily or over style.
When you shoot celebrities' houses, are they usually there?
It depends. They're there. I mean, they are always come. They're always there because we have to shoot them for the portrait.
Oh, right. Yes, of course.
But yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's like you just being in anybody's home, celebrity or not, and if they're there, like you have to be very sensitive to it. And I always say that part of my job is being like a diplomat, because you have to be. You have to make them feel comfortable that you're in their home, like rifling through their possessions. I mean, it's a very kind of intimate thing that you do as a stylist.
No, completely. And it's really similar with an interior designer.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, designers always say that it's like, they're also a therapist, and a marriage counselor and all.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you're working on someone's house, it's sensitive.
Similar. Pardon?
I said anytime you're working on someone's house, it's sensitive.
That's right.
So now maybe let's look at this next room. This is just, I want to know all about this room.
This is an amazing. This was designed by Jacques Grange, and this was on the cover of AD. And it was like really kind of irreverent and amazing. I mean, it was like high and low, and it was in one of those typical Palm Beach houses built in the 20s, sort of Spanish colonial revival. And I can't remember the name of the architect right now, but it'll come back to me. But he was, one of the important ones that did a lot of houses in that time period. And then, you see that wonderful Peter Dunham fabric on there, and these very kind of like dressed down sofas, and then there's this incredible Jean Laursat screen in the background. And I mean, everything that Jacques Grange does is so like deliberate, but he's also like has this kind of playfulness in his work. And so this was this was again about just showing where you were and bringing in palms and bringing in the right kind of florals, and showing like the playfulness of the room in a way that wasn't too serious, but told the story of the architecture and the way that he did the interiors.
Yeah, I think someone submitted a question, and I'm so sad I don't have it in my little stack here, so I kind of want to reference it now. But I think Jacques Grange is a perfect example of someone who just has so much confidence. Yes. I mean, he's an unbelievable designer, but that you are able to incorporate all these different.
That's what's interesting. It's like he's like following the rules, and I think like the most successful interior designers have this sense of being able to layer the serious with the not serious. And that's what, to me, like results in a really successful interior.
Yes. And I think also, Mieke, when I look at this, you are inviting us into the room.
Yeah.
Through the object.
I think that's always really important, is that you want to feel like you're coming through the space, that you are actually in the space and you're not just looking at a picture.
Yes, and that's what Sister and Albert sister was known to come in after the installation and bring in all of the blankets and the baskets and the flowers and the books and all of that, and bring in the clients like own possessions and scatter it around so they made it feel like home, and in a way exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's really necessary. And I know I talk to a lot of designers and they say like, in the end, a lot of times their clients, they just like don't want to spend the extra like 10% on accessories. But if you don't have those layers, an interior can read as really kind of staid.
Yes, agreed. So this is a really good question quickly from Molly Acker asking, how do you prep for a shoot before you step into a house?
So it's really about, I think I know Molly. Hi, Molly. I think it's, what's really important is I always need scouting shots. Like that's really the most important thing to me is the scouting pictures, because then I can have a conversation with the client and say, okay, I'm going through the images. This is what's missing. You don't have enough textiles. You don't have enough books. You don't have enough objects. You don't have enough side tables. You don't have enough lamps. Like whatever it is, or art. I mean, a lot of projects don't have the right kind of art or enough of the right kind of art, whatever the case may be. And so it's having this conversation in advance to make sure that we get the pieces that are necessary. So then when the time comes for the photo shoot, we're not scratching our heads thinking, oh, we really need this thing for this picture to work and we don't have it. And then the other thing that's important about scouting pictures is, just for me to mentally wrap my brain around the color story, because that's going to dictate the florals that I bring in and figuring out the colors that I want to emphasize.
Yeah. So that's just, I think it just then comes back to collaboration.
That's right. It's always a collaboration, and it's a wonderful kind of, it can be like a really wonderful relationship between the designer, the architect, photographer, and the stylist. And, that's like the fun part of the job, is like having all those things kind of come together and everybody brings a fresh set of eyes to it.
Yeah, no, completely. It reminds me of working in interior. I think everything about, for me, everything about interiors, everything about design all comes back to collaboration. And when everyone can let, everyone do their job, and what they're good at is when you see that kind of miraculous room or whatever it might be.
And like a lot of, I feel like sometimes the process is counterintuitive. And if you, you're not familiar, you're not accustomed to doing photo shoots or working with stylists, is that, a lot of the things that I feel like I do is do something that doesn't seem obvious or might even seem strange. But there's always a reason to do it.
Exactly. Sometimes it's hard to let go.
Yes. Too. And I think that's the hard part for a lot of decorators, is that like they're so invested. It's like their baby and they see it this very certain way. And it's hard to kind of step back and see it from another point of view. And I think that's a lot of times where the value of a good stylist comes in, is that they're able to say, okay, what about looking at it from this perspective?
Right. Yes, that is totally true. And I think that the whole thing is when you're actually in a space, in an interior, it's totally different than looking at an interior through a lens. So
totally different.
It's totally different. Yeah. And the more photo shoots I'm on, the more I realize that. So I think you've had so much experience. So that, when Molly asked the question about how do you prep for a shoot, it's just that the fact that you've been on set and done this for so many years, and with so many different types of designers and so many different locations, that that is really why you can come in and feel that kind of confidence that Jacques Grange feels, that confidence to come in.
You have to be decisive, and you have to have opinions. I think that's, one of the more important parts of this job, is being confident and trying something. And even if it doesn't work, then you move on and you try something else. But I think, being opinionated and having a point of view is really important. And I think that's true for any, creative line of work.
I agree. Especially when you're on set and you have how many hours, or
I know.
light.
Yeah, I know. That's in the winter, right? You'll have
Practically, there's no time.
I know. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Okay, so we are now going to answer. I have a handful of questions here, and we had about 50 questions submitted. I know I'm going a little bit over, so I'm just going to get right in it. Okay, so my first question is from Elizabeth, and I apologize if I don't pronounce her name right. It's from Elizabeth Wolfarth. What impact do you think COVID has had on design going forward?
I mean, it's interestingly enough, I think like design has been somewhat impervious to like the fallout from COVID because, and in fact, has had kind of the opposite impact where people are so much more invested in being inside their homes. And I think people are paying attention. They're like, oh, you know what? I don't like this thing. Like, why don't I change it? This is the time to change it. So I do think there's this heightened interest because people can't travel, they can't buy clothes, like, you know, especially, you know, wealthier clients, which is, I feel like a lot of, you know, who interior designers cater to. They cater to wealthy people. And so their money isn't going into the things that it used to go into. So, you know, it's actually strangely enough been a good time for the design and the interiors industry. And I think people are going to start paying more attention to what they like and what they don't like. And maybe that's not like I don't know if the person asking the question is asking it from more of like a trend point of view, that I can't speak to. But I do think people are paying more attention than they ever have been.
I agree. And I think that there is also just with like all of these amazing e-commerce websites where you can buy antiques like Parish and First Dibs and all these, there's all this like very easy education.
Yeah.
You have the time and you're wanting to invest in your house. There's a wealth of knowledge.
That's right.
Wealth of information. So I think that that's really exciting for us or for people who work in this space.
I do too.
Yeah. Okay. The next question is from Rami Calkins. Well, I think trends in design can be fun. They are indeed just a passing phase. What are some tried and true timeless design elements you've featured or coveted?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, like you have to be authentic to yourself. And then, you know, you're going to get around the issue of getting tired of something.
Right.
I mean, we can't help but be kind of influenced by the things that we see. But ultimately, if you follow like your inner inclinations and you're not like, oh, I saw this thing on Instagram and now I'm going to emulate it, you know, you're in better shape. I think you have to kind of follow your own path. Can you repeat the question again? I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to say about it.
Well, I think trends in design can be fun. They're indeed just a passing phase. What are some tried and true timeless design elements you've featured or coveted?
I mean, I always covet the same things. It's like beautiful fabric, beautiful china, beautiful upholstery. You know, I love antiques. Those are things that, you know, they're probably, most of them aren't. Everybody likes kind of what I call anemic decorating these days where there's no color or pattern. But that's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. You have no problem saying true to yourself, I think. Okay. So next question from Carrie Spears. What is a good unexpected accessory or design source?
Unexpected accessory. You know, I always think like things from nature are like an unexpected, fabulous accessory, especially in like a more, you know, and this goes both ways, whether it's like a really minimal modern house or it's a very traditional house, like bringing something in, like, you know, I have a collection of birds' nests that, you know, I collect after all the babies have left the nest, you know, and I always think they just add something. They're so complex and beautifully made. And, you know, some people have shell collections or, petrified wood or whatever the case may be. But I always think things from the natural world are such a wonderful way to bring an element of the unexpected into your home.
Oh, I love that answer. Okay. Favorite setting to style? City, country, or beach? This is from Catherine Posey.
Probably country.
Country.
I mean, because it's so wonderful to be able to take, I mean, the beach is great too, but there's something wonderful about seeing green. I mean, I think that's always my favorite thing because you can create beautiful kind of vignettes and moments outside. And nature is the most beautiful backdrop of all.
Agreed. Can you give us some quick flower arranging tips from Nan Phillip?
So, hi, Nan. My approach when I go to the flower market is to get different kinds of flowers. And there are a few kinds that I always get. I always get something that is full faced, like a peony is an example of that, or a dahlia. So something that has like a big lush face. Then I get like a more gestural, sculptural flower, like a poppy or an anemone or something like that stands up rather straight or has an interesting shape to it and is kind of more architectural and has kind of a quirky personality. I mean, I always think about the personalities of flowers and the way that they interact with one another. And then I always like to get something that feels kind of like wild, whether it's like greenery or weed. And then lastly, I like to get some kind of element of like a vine, something that's like romantic and travels and is kind of chaotic and lush looking. So that's my tip, is to get those like 4 elements. If you get a flower that represents one of those 4 elements and put it together, I think you're in good shape.
Oh, that's really great advice. I hope we'll memorialize that after this. In a newsletter. So how have you stayed inspired during shelter in place?
I mean, as I said earlier, like I just miss museums so incredibly much, and I miss traveling and looking at buildings and architecture. But my books, I have so many decorating books, and I have so many art books, and I have so many old magazines, and I really do look at them. I have a huge collection of that stuff, and I really use it, and I really reference it, and it keeps me going, honestly.
Yeah, same. Is there anything that you're reading right now or looking at, or anything that's open on your copy table?
Yeah, you know what I just got? I got a book, The Tiffany Table Settings, that just arrived in the mail from 1989 or whatever. That's been like a really
I know. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
I've been loving that as well. Okay, last question.
I read that book last night.
Okay, so last question. You have 1 hour to shop for accessories for a furnished condo. Where do you go and what do you buy? This is from Kim Atkinson.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I love the question, but I think that's impossible to answer because it depends on where you are.
Well,
are we talking accessories here?
Yeah, we're talking accessories. So
like throws, textiles are really important to layer with. Little objects and vases. You can never have enough vessels. That's what I think.
Never enough vessels.
Never enough vessles. But it's really, that's a hard question because it depends on where you are. It depends on what your resources are. It depends on where you can go. I mean,
so
in other words, there's no magic bullet. Like you can't just,
There never is, unfortunately. So I just want to end this because I just selfishly want to ask you, what are just some shops that you love in different cities? It doesn't really matter. I know that you love like shopping in general, and just like it could be anywhere in the world. Just a shop that comes to mind right now. London, New York.
Okay, you know what I love? I love Montage Antiques and
yes. Sure. Yes, Montage Antiques. I love it too.
But I mean, my favorite shopping really is like, going to flea markets and like unassuming places. It's not shops that are like on the path that everybody knows about.
Yeah. Agreed. Me too. No magic bullet.
I like unassuming stores the world over. That's kind of my cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly. The more you can rummage and find that treasure, the better.
That's right.
Thank you, Mieke.
Oh my goodness, Eliza, it was such a pleasure.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you, everybody who attended this evening. I'm so grateful for all these questions still in our chat box. So, Mieke, maybe afterwards, at some point, we could go over some of them and get back to as many of you as we can.
Absolutely.
So, thank you. Enjoy your evening. And
thank you all for listening.
yes, thanks, Mieke. Bye.
Have a good night.
You too. Goodbye. Thank you so much for joining me, and I cannot wait to see you next time. Good night.